The man who really gives the French the lead in fortification, however, was none other than Sébastien Le Prest de Vauban. A practical engineer who rose through the ranks to become, in 1703, Marshal of France, Vauban's long career in the Dutch and Spanish wars of Louis XIV provided him with the opportunity to work on more than 160 fortresses, including 33 which he built anew, and also to direct some 40 successful sieges. It was said of him that whatever he invested fell, whatever he defended held. During this time, Vauban successfully manages to produce a practical combination of bastioned anciens and aggressive outerworks, bringing the Italian fronte bastionato to its full development. Although Vauban never actually published a treatise on the art of fortification, later writers tended to group his work according to three systems. The first and most commonly employed followed closely the design advocated by earlier French military engineers such as Pagan, and used regular polygonal bastions and detached outerworks in the form of tenailles and ravelins, both placed in front of curtains in the ditch. First system bastion fronts were usually about 330 meters in length, with large bastions and flanks, making obtuse angles with both faces of the bastion and the curtain walls. The curtains were protected by low tenailles, joined by caponiers of communication to ravelins, lying further out in the ditch, beyond which lay the chemin couvert or covered way, interspersed by traverses to protect troops, while places of arms in the salient and re-entrant angles of the chemin couvert enabled counter-attacks. The second system, as employed at Belfort and Besançon, was the result of Vauban's practical experience in siegecraft, which now induced him to modify the trace of his fortresses to enable a more prolonged defense. Although retaining their polygonal structure, he detached the bastions from the main ancient, transforming them into counterguards, and replaced them by small bastioned towers, while at the same time lengthening the curtain walls. The third system, which was only used once at Neuf-Brissages, consisted of a front of considerable depth, with bastions and cavaliers, counterguards and tenailles, and the covered way with large re-entered places of arms. Vauban's methods were perpetuated with various modifications by numerous French engineers, the most noteworthy of whom was Louis de Cormontan, and they were employed in numerous commissions outside France. Vauban's first system, as modified by Cormontan to include enlarged bastions, ravelins and reinforced covered ways, was adopted by the French School of Engineers, founded about 1750 at Les Mézières, as the perfection of the bastion trace. French engineers who visited Malta in the course of the 18th century, such as Colin, Tinier, Mondion, Maigret, Follard and Pont-Leroy, were all influenced by Vauban's school of thought, and all the fortifications built in the Maltese islands throughout the course of the 1700s reflect French military architecture at its best. Vauban's systematic bent and insistence on order in design, execution and reporting, coupled with the efficacy of the French governmental bureaucracy, created a corps of military engineers that was both efficient and effective. This was perhaps his greatest achievement for French military engineering. That is, to cite the words of Janis Mangins in his book Conserving the Enlightenment, the laying of the basis for a bureaucratized, rationally organized and selected corps of engineers who had a standard body of practice and procedures for their work. It was, therefore, not simply just new French ideas and devices that Brigadier Détinier and his military mission brought to Malta in 1715. They also helped usher in a new sense of professionalism into the order's military establishment and fortification atelier. The prima donna attitude of many an earlier haughty Italian military engineers such as Floriani and Laparelli was replaced by the professionalism of disciplined men who were the product of a controlled system and a formalized school of military engineering. Indeed, the French military mission's first task was to carry out a vast stock-taking exercise of the fortifications existing in 1715, measuring and drawing all the defences around the island. Most of the plans, which can be found in the Order's archives at the National Library in Valletta, were actually produced during the seminal period. Secondly, Jacob de Tinier and his assistant Charles-François de Mondion then set their mind to dealing with the problem of completing the harbour fortifications. Most of these works still lacked parapets, embrasures, platforms, and most importantly, outerworks. They therefore designed covered ways, lunettes, gateways, and underground countermines for most of the fortified land fronts, starting from Fort Ricasli all the way to Birgu, Floriana, and Valletta itself. It was no mean task in itself, given the extent and scale of the local fortifications. However, owing to the efforts of the Prior of France, the Knight Philippe de Vendôme, who it seems did not want to be outdone, Tinier and his team, and much against their advice, were sidetracked by the order into implementing a vast scheme of coastal defences, the batteries, redoubts and entrenchments, many of which can be still seen today. These works actually proved to be amongst the first examples of French military architecture in the island, based as they were on patterns evolved in France towards the end of the 17th century, such as those at Fort Lupin, built in 1683, and La Tour de la Camarette. The Maltese examples, however, were much smaller in scale, but this subject will be dealt in more detail in the following lecture. More importantly, the French military mission was eager to build a new and veritable fortress in the French style, and one can understand this. They did not come here simply to patch up the Order's defences. They found the perfect excuse in the centuries-old problem posed by the unfortified quarantine island in Marsamxett harbour, a dangerous position threatening the exposed flank of the city of Valletta. Overflowing with ideas, they proposed and designed numerous schemes for the defence of this little leaf-shaped island, now known as Manoel Island, that also housed the quarantine hospital. Schemes which included both large batteries and redoubts, as well as a square-shaped fort with corner bastions, much in the manner of the citadels of Saint-Martin-de-Ré, Mont-Louis and de la Prée on the Île de Ré, as well as all these elements brought together in one complete design. The proposed new fort, however, did not materialize at this time, owing to the huge constraints on the Order's financial situation, while most of the French team was called back to service in France. The Knights were therefore caught without a resident military engineer to supervise all these new works. Grandmaster Perellos managed to secure the services of Mondion, who eventually was released to serve as Ingegnere della Religione and was made a Knight of Grace. Mondion would serve the Order faithfully for 18 years until his death in 1733. His long stint as resident military engineer would come to represent the most intense period of fortress building activities in the Maltese Islands, and would see the construction of one of the most beautiful works of fortification ever built in Malta. The opportunity to build the desired fort in the quarantine harbour materialized shortly after the election of Grandmaster Perello's successor, Antonio Manuel de Villena, a descendant of Ferdinand II of Castile, who, though famed for his piety, had nonetheless been made a Grand Cross ad honoris for his valor in the battles of the Morea at the age of 32. It was this new and enlightened sovereign who, aware of the Order's financial difficulties, offered to finance the construction of the desired fort on the Insoletto out of his own magistral revenues, and even went on to set up a fund, the so-called Fondazione Manuel, to look after its upkeep. Named in his honor, the first stone of Fort Manoel was laid with great ceremony on 14 September 1723. The date on the main gate, however, reads 1726, but we know that the fort was not truly completed until well into the 1730s. Silver medals commemorating the building of Fort Manoel, showing the profile of Grandmaster Villena and the plan of the fort on the reverse side, together with other coins, were buried with the foundation stones. A note in the